Married couple Bill and Peggy Stephenson, both aged 74, were found murdered inside their apartment on Ridge Edge Court in Florence, Kentucky on Sunday, May 29, 2011. Their time of death was worked out to have happened between 1 and 4 a.m. because one of the victims had a medical device which pinpointed time of death. The precise time of death is known, at least for one of the victims, due to a medical device that had been implanted in the body of that victim. That may have been a pacemaker, defibrillator, or some other medical device capable of recording time. Law enforcement have never released the precise time. Their deaths were due to sharp force and blunt force trauma. The instrument object weapon which was used was not revealed. Their son-in-law, CJV, went around to their home on Sunday, May 29, 2011, after the couple did not show for church at the Union Baptist Church. CJV discovered their bodies around 12:45 and 1 p.m. and went around to the sliding glass doors attached to the room where one of the bodies were found. The first person of interest, who investigators considered a witness, was a trucker who was believed to have spoken to Bill Stephenson on Friday, May 27, 2011, at the Travel Centers of America truck stop located in the 7700 block of Burlington Pike in Florence, Kentucky. He was identified after an information update in June 2011 when an acquaintance of his saw his picture on the television locally in Kentucky. The man contacted the Meriwether County, Georgia Sheriff's Office after he learned he was being looked for. In a press release update in July 2011, the Boone County Sheriff's Office investigators claimed that a transient named Sherman D. Angel was identified as a person that they wanted to speak to who was seen with Bill Stephenson at the truck stop on Friday, May 27, 2011. Sherman Dwayne Angel was later located, and he called into the office when he heard he was being looked for by the police. He spoke to detectives and was initially considered as a possible witness. 59-year-old Sherman Dwayne Angel passed away on September 24, 2022. The nephew of Bill and Peggy Stephenson, Charles Steve Stephenson, was looked as a person of interest because he murdered a female friend of his named Lee Jennings inside her home in Dearborn County, Indiana on March 29, 2012. His DNA was tested and was not a match to the DNA acquired from the crime scene, which is believed to be the killer's DNA. Rumors have circulated around Charles Stephenson's possible involvement, and some have speculated that he may have been involved in his mother's death. His mother, 67-year-old Josephine Stephenson, died in a house fire on November 5, 1994, at her and her husband's modular log cabin-style house. A friend and neighbor, 27-year-old Jesse Brinkman, had tried to rescue her and said he didn't think she would have accidentally caused the fire by leaving an appliance turned on. Her husband, 72-year-old Robert Bob Stephenson, died a year prior to her death while on a fishing trip in South Dakota on October 31, 1993. The motive for Charles Stephenson's involvement has been speculated that maybe it was because he was cut out of a family inheritance worth hundreds of thousands of dollars after Bill Stephenson became executor to Alfred Bucky Stephenson's will after he passed away. Samuel Little, who is one of the most prolific serial killers in history, has been brought up in the past as a possible person of interest. He had confessed to unsolved murders spanning decades and had confessed to murders which occurred in Ohio and Kentucky. Samuel Little was in Columbus, Ohio, when he was arrested and released from jail 5 days later in April 2011. He was apparently in the area for the window of opportunity around the time the Stephensons were murdered, as he was hitchhiking from Ohio to Kentucky between April and June and traveled on foot close to Interstate 71. His modus operandi was different to how the Stephenson couple were murdered. Boone County Sheriff's Office Detective Coy Cox believed he wasn't the suspect due to his method of killing, but he was not marked off the list. Samuel Little killed his victims by choking and strangling them to death. All Samuel Little's victims were females, and the majority of his female victims were black women. He was convicted of 8 murders, but 60 victims have been formally connected to him. he has admitted to killing 93 victims. He passed away aged 80 in a Los Angeles County area hospital on December 30th, 2020. Other persons of interest were truckers who had drove in and through Kentucky and neighboring states. A person of interest came from a podcast ran by Melissa Morgan called Just the Tipsters, which helped acquire a tip in the summer of 2020. The person of interest was a truck driver who used to live in northern Kentucky but moved to California. Knowing Bill Stephenson worked with the Chapel Ministry at a truck stop, investigators tracked him down and collected his DNA. Detective Coy Cox has also claimed in an interview that investigators were looking into the Wiccan community for persons of interest. The killer or killers may have come through the rear sliding door, which was not locked. One victim was found in the room, which could be accessed by the door. The second victim was found in a separate room. One of the victims had a post-mortem injury, and elements of the crime scene were staged with items from inside the home. Law enforcement, FBI, and Detective Coy Cox agreed the items strewn around the body were not ritualistic in nature. One victim had more injuries, indicating that they may have tried to defend themselves. The crime scene was staged in a particular way, which Detective Coy Cox described as unusual, and had alluded it to being religious in nature. There were symbols and there were items which were used at the scene to indicate strong feelings or opinions about the victims, Bill and Peggy Stephenson. The killer left a message of some sort. No sign of forced entry and no fingerprints were found. Unknown DNA was found at the crime scene. Photographs of family and friends were placed in certain ways and turned over by the killer or killers. The home was cleaned and the killer seemed to have felt comfortable in the surroundings of the home. Detective Coy Cox of the Boone County Sheriff's Office has made varying statements in media interviews, and I find it hard to decipher what the actual truth is regarding the information he reveals about the crime scene. The Boone County Sheriff's Office and Detective Coy Cox has stated that the DNA acquired from the crime scene was the killer's DNA and that it could not be used in a genealogy database and was not suitable for phenotyping as far back as 2019 in media statements. It has also been stated that they have a DNA profile, and it seems that the profile might be a partial DNA profile, and it's been assumed that the DNA is nuclear DNA and or touch DNA evidence that the investigators acquired from the crime scene. It's unknown what other kind of biological evidence they have, such as other trace evidence, like fibers and hairs. It's not known to the public if the DNA belongs to a male or female. It has been claimed that they did not find any fingerprints from the crime scene. Advancements in forensic DNA analysis and DNA technology might be the key, and the investigators may have to patiently wait for time to ultimately be the undoing of the killers or killers involved in the crime. In February 2023, Boone County Sheriff's Office Detective Coy Cox spoke to reporters in a Fox 19 Now special about the Stephenson and the Delphi cases. He said investigators received a tip in November 2022, which led them to Indiana. He told a news reporter that he had received some information from an individual regarding the Delphi murders in Indiana, and they had given reasons as to why the same person might be involved in the Stephenson case. Coy Cox said that there was a little piece of information that really made the case specifically interesting to investigators working on the Stephenson case. The information pointed Boone County investigators toward a specific person who had a specific item they were interested in. Detective Coy Cox didn't reveal what the item was to the news reporters, but he said that investigators had been to the northern part of Indiana, investigating a guy, following him around, looking for things, collecting all of the information and evidence that they would need to at least vet him as best as they could. Cox told the Fox 19 Now reporter that the man was cooperative and that investigators were able to go down that path with him, and he articulated good reason as to why the item may have existed. Cox also told the reporter that the Boone County Sheriff's Office sent what they found to Indiana State Police, since they were the agency handling Abby and Libby's murder case. Detective Coy Cox told Fox 19 that their investigation into a potential link between the two cases did not include Richard Allen, and when the Boone County detectives were in Delphi, Allen was already in custody, where he had been since October 2022, accused in the murders of Abby and Libby. A woman left a comment on a video about a cross in relation to Delphi, and that she told the EBI everything she knew at the end of November of 2022. It was about a man who lived in Indiana and was a truck driver, that he had a previous felony and that he had a violent history that he was no charged for. She said he had an open case with a state agency out of Texas that had never been closed. She also said in the YouTube comment that she did not know of the Stephenson case, but that she is even more concerned the open case had implications of attempted faux alternative religion elements. She said her person of interest started purging and cleaning out their home in Indiana drastically right at the time the police searched Rick Allen's home, with many things going to the dump, load upon load. She said her person of interest potentially knew Charles "Stevie" Stephenson, but claimed she didn't know the Stephenson case. She later on claimed that her person of interest was under federal suspicion of either producing or distributing child sex abuse material at the dawn of the internet. She then claims if a cross was involved, that her person of interest had an aunt which made handmade crosses. She said she didn't know of Alex Voorhees, and that her curiosity has piqued about who the individual Cox had brought up. Detective Coy Cox admitted in private that the tip Alex Voorhees made in September 2022 was the tip which put together the possibility of a connection between the Stephensons and Delphi, after Alex came up with the idea that maybe the Stephensons and the Delphi case were connected, and had also given information to Cox on persons of interest through tips he made. He was the only person who theorized the possibility that they may have been connected at that point. He had also made a tip in June 2021 about the possibility of Stephensons and Delphi being connected. Alex Voorhees brought up a murder-suicide blog post website that had a post of a news article about the Stephenson case released on Tuesday, May 31st, 2011, 2 days after the bodies were found. An anonymous comment posted on January 5th, 2012, on the murder-suicide blog post with the article claimed that they knew the victim's grandson and that the crime was no murder-suicide. They said the family told him the victims were almost decapitated and told them other details that they guessed the police did not want released because it may harm the case against the killer or killers. They then said a person assuming to be Bill Stephenson hung out at a truck stop church to spread the word of God to people, but he wasn't a wacko, and that he was a very respected man in the area. Alex saw the David Erskine Facebook messages and heard about the rumor that Libby's head was nearly decapitated, and that the phrases such as signature and body posing made him think that they may have been connected. Detective Coy Cox spoke to YouTube creator Ruckus Rocks in March 2023 and told him information not related to the Delphi case had brought him to Indiana. Detective Coy Cox also spoke to the Murder Sheet in March 2023 and told them that the Stephensons and the Delphi case were not connected. He has also claimed in private that he used the Delphi case to help gain publicity for the Stephenson case. I believe Detective Coy Cox may have blended tips together in relation to a tip about an item in November 2022 and the Alex Voorhees tips, and created a story as to how Delphi and the Stephenson case were connected. There was no mention of an item like a cross at the Delphi crime scene, which has ever been made public by Allen's defense or by the investigators and prosecution. The sticks laid upon Libby and Abby's body is left up to interpretation, and I personally don't believe they're runes because the theory behind it falls apart under scrutiny. I think Detective Coy Cox made up an elaborate story from tips in order for the Stephenson case to gain more attention and publicity. In April 2024, Detective Coy Cox answered questions privately and claimed that the Stephenson's killer was a lot more violent, and the Stephenson double murder crime scene was more shocking and brutal than the Delphi murders crime scene. He also told a person in private that the real reason investigators went to Delphi was because of a truck seen on County Road near the Indiana Packers on February 13, 2017. The person who drove the truck was apparently talked to and cleared. A similar truck, but not the same truck, was apparently seen in the area around the time Bill and Peggy Stephenson were murdered. He also again stated that the Delphi and Stephenson cases are not connected. A writer from a local newspaper who knew the Stephenson family responded to a message by a person who was curious about what the writer may have known about the case and what they knew about Charles Stephenson. The writer revealed that they heard rumors that the bodies were mutilated in a particular way and that the crime scene was staged. They said that one person had told them that the victim's eyes had been removed, but they could not be sure if it was true. They also said they were told that the killer or killers had surrounded the bodies with circles of salt. They revealed the caskets were closed at the funeral. I've heard about the rumors of Bill and Peggy Stephenson having their eyes cut out and placed on a Bible in the past. I don't know the validity of those claims and how true that is. One person said a relative who was a medical examiner had told them that, but I don't know if there's any truth to the rumor.